Thank you, Gloria, for having us here today, and thank you everyone for attending. My name is Kyle Sky. I'm an instructional designer with the University of Wisconsin Extended Campus, and I'll let my colleague introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica O'Neill, and I'm also an instructional designer with UW Extended Campus.
Thanks, Jessica. Just a little bit about the University of Wisconsin Extended Campus. We work collaboratively with the physical campuses of the University of Wisconsin system to offer entirely online programs in a variety of delivery formats. So we are continuously interested in best practices in online course design and how to improve the student experience, especially in a delivery format that some of them might find new or challenging. And today, we're bringing you from passive to active, creating interactive content using the H5P tool. We'll be talking a little bit about what that is today, how you can go about using it and following in our footsteps as we've explored using this tool and sharing some use cases as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jessica to kick off our presentation.
Great. Thanks, Kyle. So before we get going, I thought we would start with just a little preview of some of the things that can be created with H5P, just so that you can get a sense of the tool and some of the things that can be created. So the first thing I'm going to share with you is a cyber threat scenario interactive image. And what this is from an introductory computer course. And it's an example of an authentic assessment where we created an interactive image with hotspots. And when students click on the hotspots, there's other graphics embedded as well as prompts and questions about different cybersecurity issues that they might encounter in a real world situation, like going out to visit a coffee shop. So, leaving a screen unattended, some suspicious looking emails, and those types of things. And then underneath the interactive H5P component, we have a traditional Canvas quiz where students reflect on the choices that they made in the cyber scenario. And then when they submit it, they get feedback letting them know whether or not they made a safe choice or not. Another example I'd like to show you is something called a dialogue card. And it's like a flashcard, but it has a lot more bells and whistles, if you will. And so imagine that this is from an interpersonal communication course, and you're talking about difficult conversations and navigating difficult conversations. This example would be having a difficult conversation with a relative during the holiday season and how you might navigate that. So within this example, we have the flashcard itself and an image representing the character that's speaking, if you will, and then the character's, you know, speech prompt, if you will. We're also able to put little hints on the card. So in this case, knowing that we're practicing having difficult conversations, students are asked to reflect on whether or not they noticed the emotional language that the relative used, as well as how might they start to avoid confrontation with the question? Students click the turn button and they're provided a sample response where they can compare what they would say and then a tip to crafting responses to similar situations in the future. And then they scroll through the conversation and get to practice navigating it. So give it your best guess, and we'd love to see your answers in the chat on this. How much time, let's focus on the dialogue card example. How much time do you think it took to create that interactive experience for students? Go ahead and post that in the chat. And then Kyle and Gloria, if you would maybe help me out by letting me know some of the responses, I would appreciate it.
Yep, I've got my eye on the chat. We have Gloria guessing that it took at least an hour.
Any other guesses coming through?
I don't see anybody else typing, but it's not too late to enter your guess. Oh, I see a couple more. All right, we have a guess of 30 minutes and 30 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, we're kind of in the ballpark there. I would say start to finish, And that includes getting all of the content together and actually building the interactive and then putting it in Canvas. I would say Gloria is our winner at just about an hour. But I will specify that the part that took me the longest was putting together the content. Once I had my content, building an H5P honestly took less than 30 minutes. So that just kind of gives you an idea of the quickness and easy uh, functionality of H5P. I will say I was also assisted with AI a little bit, especially with the images, but we'll get into that more a little bit later. All right, Kyle, do you want to tell us a bit more about H5P itself?
I would love to. All right. So you've seen a couple of specific examples. So you have a sense of what H5P kind of looks like in a course. It's colorful. Usually, it's image based. It's interactive. I want to talk a little bit more broadly about what H5P is, in case you've never encountered this tool before. H5P is made using HTML5, which is the programming language that underpins the entire World Wide Web. And specifically, what it's used for is creating interactive components or pieces of content within web platforms. So, if you've ever seen anybody embed a YouTube video in a web page, or if you're an instructional designer or faculty member, you've more than likely embedded resources in your LMS pages. This functions exactly the same way, right? So, you create a piece of content, generate that embed code and drop it right into your online space. The really great thing about this is it's made to be very accessible to anyone. You don't need to know how to program. In fact, building the content is kind of like filling out a form, and the organization H5P has pre-created a multitude of different content types that you can use to increase engagement and interactivity in your learning experiences. I'm actually going to drop a link into the chat right now. This goes over to h5p.org and their examples and downloads page. So if you'd like to kind of browse through a little bit while we're talking, this will give you an idea of the wide variety of types of content you can easily generate using H5P. So in addition to creating interactive media, you can also create a variety of self-assessments. Uh, Typically, these would take the form of ungraded self-assessments that live somewhere where students are getting other content, right? They've read a portion of text, maybe even a piece of an OER, watched a video. It's very easy to create a really interesting self-assessment that's paired with that learning resource. One of the sort of frequent pieces of feedback that we've gotten about H5P is it's very slick, it's very modern looking when it's actually deployed in the LMS, and you saw that again with Jessica's examples. And I want to emphasize something that's really kind of resonated with us is that students expect this kind of experience when they're online, right? Um, Both traditional and non-traditional age students have a lot of experience navigating in online spaces, right? Amazon, Google, Facebook, those are really clean, easy to navigate interfaces that also offer a lot of rich interactivity. So students are coming more and more to expect these kinds of experiences in, and let's face it, an educational experience that they're often paying quite a bit for, right? So developing content like this really elevates the student experience and brings it more in line with their expectations. And then finally, you can see that bottom red bubble there related to accessibility. Uh, we all have standards and best practices that we aim for in terms of the accessibility of our content, and H5P really seamlessly fits into a lot of those best practices. They curate the accessibility rating of all of their content types, so you can easily select content types that fit into how you need students to be able to access materials.
All right, so we're about a year into our implementation of H5P in multiple types of courses. And during that time, we've really identified three main use cases for the tool. And so I'll walk you through some scenarios that are based on actual problems that we encountered with faculty and show you a little bit about how we use H5P to address those. So use case number one is adding interactivity. So imagine you're revising an existing course and you look at the content and you just think, man, I'd really like to make this more interactive. Or I think if it was a bit more interactive or hands-on, students would understand this content better. You'd really like them to be able to do something instead of just passively take in the content. And you've found maybe a few YouTube videos, but once again, videos are pretty passive. We're not actually asking students to do things with them. So some examples are using that interactive graphic like we saw before. And this example comes from a general psychology course. And I was working with this instructor, and they conveyed that parts of a neuron, structure and function of neurons, was always a sticky point, and the instructor really felt like if the students could interact with it somehow, they would understand it better. So we use that interactive image to create an interactive diagram of the structure and function of a neuron. And so students can click on this and explore the different parts of a neuron. And then we added a check your understanding activity underneath. Students drag and drop the steps of neural communication. And then when they're ready, they can check their answer. It shows them some instant feedback. They can either show the solution or retry, and they can play this as many times as they want. And it's an ungraded, completely low stakes way for students to have some hands-on interactivity, as well as some low stakes practice in the course. Another example comes from a business communication course. This instructor had given just a basic lesson on common grammatical errors and grammatical mistakes that you might find in a piece of writing. She didn't want to spend a lot of time grading an assignment where students corrected some errors in a piece of text. So we added this H5P element that allows students to mark the words that they think are errors. So anywhere that they think they notice a spelling or grammatical error, they can click on it and highlight it and then check their answers. Once again, this is a really quick way for the students to get immediate feedback about the errors that they caught versus the errors that they missed, and it saved the instructor some grading time, and it was much more hands-on than maybe watching a video or reading through a lecture. Another use case that we found was incorporating low stakes knowledge checks. Now, once again, the two examples that you saw were also knowledge checks, right? But in this case, imagine you're working on a course and you don't have a lot of time to make substantive changes. And as part of the course content, maybe the instructor has some videos, has some recorded lecture videos, or even written commentary that they're asking students to take in. And so how might we make those lectures more interactive and get that knowledge check to ensure that students are getting the material that we want them to get without maybe necessarily pulling them out of Canvas or sending them over to a completely different Canvas quiz. We used a couple of different tools in H5P to solve this problem, and I've got some examples here. Going back to that psychology course, the instructor had really indicated that the concept of classical conditioning was a struggle for students. They just didn't have a lot of opportunities to practice before the quiz. It's a tough concept, and so we wanted to add in some more opportunities for students to practice the content. So they had watched a video on it. They'd obviously read their textbook section on it, and we gave them a practice problem with a drag and drop element where they drag the classical conditioning components next to the examples from the little practice scenario. They can check their answer. Obviously, I did terrible on this go around. And then they can retry it as many times as they would like. And once again, they have that option to see the solution. And then one of the great things about H5P and integrating it within your own LMS is we were able to use some of our own H5 or our own LMS tools to combine with H5P to show the explanations for students. And so we have a little hidden div element there that we can allow the students to hide and then reveal the explanations for why the answers are correct. Once again, completely ungraded, just a really quick low stakes practice. In a similar fashion, this marketing course had some written commentary that the instructor created because she wanted to add more real life examples to the course that she felt were lacking. But once again, she wanted to ensure that students were engaging with it and understanding it. So we went back to that matching activity, and students can drag and drop the examples next to what they think matches up here. And then they can check their answers and see the solution or completely retry it. So once again, it was just a really great way for the instructor to put in an activity to give students the opportunity to check their knowledge and make sure they're on the right track. It embeds right within the content, so we didn't have to link students out to either another quiz or send them out to an external site. Our final use case are assessment assets. So creating content in H5P that we can really design an assessment around. So for an example, the idea of authentic assessments might be really appealing, but maybe you struggle to find a way to make them quick and easy to grade. You like the idea of using quizzes in Canvas because students can be provided instant feedback and they are quick to grade. However, we typically don't think of quizzes as being that authentic of an assessment. So how could we add how could we use H5P to add a bit more authenticity to that work? And we'll go back to that cyber threat scenario that we saw at the beginning of the presentation, where once again, we introduce a real world scenario where you're going to a public place, connecting to the internet, and some of the challenges and issues that might come up pertaining to cybersecurity. And it's a scenario embedded within an image. There's a little story about you have your coffee and you're getting ready to work. You need to pick the Wi-Fi network you want to connect to. You have, you're searching for tickets to a Green Bay Packers game. We are here in Wisconsin after all. And so they're given some links to see if they can discern which link is legitimate and which link isn't. And then, like I mentioned before, they reflect on their choices in the quiz questions and they're provided that instant feedback about whether or not their choices were safe. We've utilized the interactive image a lot, but there are so many other ways that you can use H5P content types to create these authentic assessments. So you could create a piece of content for students to explore and then write a written reflection about. So for example, that dialogue card that we showed at the beginning as well. Students could go through that and then they could write a written reflection about how they feel that they did or how they might have handled the conversation a little bit differently. Or in some cases, maybe there's a framework that students will use throughout the course. I'm thinking specifically of, in marketing, like there's the 4 Ps. We could create an interactive around the 4 Ps of marketing that students could revisit and use as a support tool as they work on different types of assessments. We could also use H5P to create ungraded pre-assessments that would allow students to check their understanding before engaging with content. They would take a formal assessment and then they'd be able to compare and reflect on their learning and growth. Obviously, these are fun, they're engaging, and they look great, but we want to know that they're going to work, right? And so the research is actually very clear, and that was actually where Kyla and I started when we were looking at this tool. Is we want to make sure that not only are we implementing something that's easy to use, but it's effective. And we found a lot of great resources that really do support the use of a tool like H5P in online courses. So for example, if you're familiar with any of the small teaching concepts put forward by Flower Darby in her books and her work, you know, H5P is great for retrieving, interleaving, connecting, practicing, and motivating students. And it can be done in a number of different ways that really support some of those ideas of effective online teaching. Another research study titled Implementing H5P Online Interactive Activities at Scale showed a demonstrated student improvement compared to static content. So essentially, we have content like readings and videos, and students who engage with H5P content perform better than the students who only engage with those static types of content. My favorite report, my favorite research study, because at the end of the day, this is all about students, right? Is students self-report increased learning when activities like H5P activities are included in a course. So, in a study titled Reimagining Physiology Education with Interactive Content Developed in H5P, 60% of students completed the H5P activities consistently, despite the fact that they were not graded. And even though students reported that it required an increased learning effort, 90% of student participants agreed that their knowledge was enhanced by the repeated practice with the H5P activities. They also reported that it helped them keep up with their studies. So I thought that that was just a really powerful statistic. And of course, it's coming from the students themselves saying, I enjoyed this. I feel like it helped me learn. A little bit on the process of creating H5P. We're not going to do necessarily a full walkthrough of creating a content type because, as Kyle will talk about, it looks a little different depending on the interface that you're engaging with. But regardless of a content type that you're choosing to create with H5P, the process is the same. First and foremost, you should have a need that you're trying to fulfill with a content type. We kind of think about like problem solution. So is it a use case or is it like what we've identified, like a knowledge check or an assessment asset or, just adding interactivity? Does it support an online best practice? Like we want to make sure that that's what we're using it for and we're not just putting it in there for flash and that we're all flash and no substance. We don't want that at all. Next, we're going to gather the content for the interactive. Like I mentioned at the beginning, that's really the part that took me the longest, but there are ways that you can shortcut that. Kyle will talk a little bit about the use of templates in a little bit to kind of quickly fill out information and use when you're collaborating with other people. You can use AI like I did for images or to help word things, and that can be a little bit of a shortcut there as well. The construction part is relatively simple and quick. I tell people that if you can fill out a form online and if you can upload a file, you can create a piece of content in H5P. Those are really the main skills that you would need to have. The size of your content will affect the construction time. But like I said, once I had all my content together, I was able to construct the dialogue cards in maybe 10 minutes. Then we have the deployment into your learning management system, and there's a couple of different options. You can embed it just like you would a video, or you can do a full third-party integration with a learning management system and integrate it that way. But either way, the nice part is it integrates right in your learning management system, and we're not having to send students outside of their course.
Yeah, and as we move on to the next slide, I'll just mention a related question was brought up in chat. Can this be deployed into Blackboard Learn Ultra? So yeah, H5P integrates with all major learning management systems, as an LTI. Um, but as I mentioned in my chat reply, if you have the ability to embed content using HTML iframes or embed codes, you have the ability to deploy H5P content in that manner as well. It's not necessary to integrate directly with the learning management system. Cool. All right. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about trying H5P for yourself. So we've shown you a lot of examples, but really the best way to get a handle on it is to experience it for yourself. And we're fortunate that there are um, quite a few free ways to do so. So one of them is through h5p.org, and this is an important distinction. H5p.org is sort of the free um, uh, promotional space from the H5P organization. H5P.com is the more paid subscription hosting side of the business, and I'll talk a little bit about the details there. And first of all, I do want to stipulate, we are in no way promoting H5P. We're not representatives of H5P. This is just kind of the tool that our team landed on that met that need that we identified within our organization. I'm sure there are other ways to do this. We just wanted to share our expertise to kind of ease other people into this tool or potentially a related tool if you found that your organization had a similar need. So for h5p.org, you can create a profile on that site and you have an unlimited free trial to try a limited number of content types in H5P. The idea here is to give you a sense of the workflow of building a piece of H5P content and a little bit of the ability to experience how you might deploy that content. You have the ability to generate those embed codes and actually embed a trial piece of content, even in your own learning management system. Um, the reason that it isn't recommended that you use this indefinitely is because the storage space is not stable, right? So something that you create in there, they might adjust how it's linked, and if you have things deployed in courses that are offered to students, suddenly those pieces of content may no longer function or be active for those students, or they may be interrupted by maintenance or something like that. H5P.com, like I said, is the side where you would explore the possibility of a subscription-based model for hosting content that you develop. There is a 30-day free trial where you can get access to. It's pretty much all of the content types to test out building those. You can see what the authoring and the admin interface looks like. And overall, h5p.com is more stable. The storage space that you pay for, that you host your content in, is owned by h5p.com, and you have full control over the stability of those materials. There is also another way to go about developing content and deploying it in your learning space, and we'll move on to the next slide to talk about that distinction. So there's h5p.com, which I just discussed. That requires a limited IT infrastructure on your part because all the hosting, the management of the material is done by H5P, but there are some limitations, mainly being it's nearly impossible to collaborate on content. If Jessica were to build something, I would have to duplicate that piece of content and bring it over into my space that I control as an author to make edits and changes, and then again, only I would have access to that version. So that didn't really work for us. There's also a limited number of authors depending on how much you're paying for the subscription, and so it was difficult for a team, pretty much at any significant scale, to systematically develop content. So what we moved over to in collaboration with our learning technology team and IT team is the self-hosted method, where you actually purchase your own hosting space, you set up your own WordPress site, and deploy the H5P WordPress plugin into that site. Um, it takes a lot more technical expertise that we do not possess. Again, this is really working alongside our learning technology team. But overall, outside of actually, using IT team time and resources, the cost is dramatically greater. Oftentimes, you're getting greater storage, the ability to have unlimited authors. You can collaborate on content and share things like templates. So this is really the self-hosting WordPress plugin was really the version that worked best for us. But depending on the size of your team, h5p.com may work just fine for you. All right, so let's move on to the next step here. And then we did want to share, again, we've been experimenting this for about a year. So the hope is if you decide to adopt a tool like this, that we can share some insights into how to fast track how you're leveling up with the tool, right? So after experimenting, after prototyping and piloting some things with faculty that we work with, we've been able to build H5P or at least to a certain extent, move H5P into our formal development process, right? So working alongside things like traditional media, recordings, video, that sort of thing, we can identify, again, those specific use cases where H5P is the best tool for the job. We've also, over the past year, been working on upskilling our team. So it's not just Jessica and I that have expertise in this tool, but we have training and documentation for the rest of our team as well, so that as others adopt it, it's easier for them to bring on their own or our best practices. And then finally, as Jessica alluded to, we've found that w- we can greatly speed up the content creation process by strategically sourcing images and using AI to generate content, whether that's images or text. Um, you'll notice again as you browse through the content types that images are kind of really key to leveling up your H5P content. Thinking about that physiology article that Jessica mentioned, you'll probably want a lot of images talking about the different components of the human body that lets students interact and explore with those visual components. So we'll move to the next slide. We're very close to the end of our time. I just want to share some of the additional resources that we recommend, and that'll be coming along via email. Um, I have a sort of a streamlined version of our own internal H5P documentation that you'll be receiving. You'll also receive a template worksheet for the dialogue cards that we developed, and you can use that to, again, streamline your content creation process. And then we recommend checking out, if you haven't already, very likely because you're working in this space, you've heard of these before. Um, but if you want a really concise summary of the value that you're getting out of a tool like this, check out Small Teaching Online by Flower Darby or Make It Stick by Peter Brown. There are some pretty timeless principles that the H5P tool speaks to in those texts. Yep, and then Gloria mentioned in the chat that she will be sending a copy of the presentation along, as well as those resources that we mentioned. Um, yeah, so you've got our contact information up on the screen as well. Please, we encourage you to reach out to us if you have any questions, if you want to explore an idea with us. The heart of the University of Wisconsin is the Wisconsin idea. If you're not familiar with that, is the idea that basically everything that we do should be benefiting the citizens of our state, and the natural extension of that is citizens of anybody in the realm of higher education. So if we have an opportunity to better serve, our colleagues, please let us know, reach out to us, contact us. We're very happy and excited to share. So we've timed our presentation notes, so we do have time for questions. If people would like to add things in the chat, if you're curious, if you want to see something again, please let us know. We're happy to share anything. And Jessica, if you had any other thoughts you wanted to share at this point while people are drumming up their questions.
We really appreciate the time that you've taken today, and it's at the end of the day, it's all about students, and we really feel that this is a great tool that can get some interactivity and really support students well in online learning.
Mhm. So we did another question. Can you download and then upload the content to the LMS? Um, so Mm, yes. I'll just say yes, because I think what you're looking for is if I deploy the content within the learning management system, can I edit it? Can I say download a colleague's piece of content and modify it myself? Absolutely. So you can set your H5P content up so that others can download it as a file or access the same embed code you're using, or again, because of the online hosted nature and the embedded nature of the content, you can edit content that is live and embedded out there in your LMS via your authoring interface, and those changes will be immediately reflected the next time anybody accesses that piece of content. So you don't have to worry about like in a traditional LMS where you're, say, uploading a video file to make it accessible to students and then downloading it again if I need to edit or update a piece of it. There's none of that. You always have access to the back end of the H5P component, so you can adjust language, you can add licensing information, you can update it without actually even really going out to the LMS. Everything's right there in your authoring interface. All right, and then just a comment from Kristen Bishop, saying that they liked the research that we shared. Yeah, we, like Jessica mentioned, we wanted to start this project out on the right foot. We knew, especially, our faculty and colleagues that we work with, were going to be asking, hey, what's the kind of the justification behind this? We've all we've all gone through that experience where a colleague is excited about something just because a tool is sort of flashy and interesting or does something new, and we didn't want to fall prey to that, right? So the first question we asked is, are we interested in this tool because of a legitimate educational need, or just because it's kind of neat and we want to learn more about it? Um, Fortunately, the answer is both, right? It not only does it look really good? Are they fun and easy to interact with when they're deployed in the learning management system? But it's very easy to align the content that you build with online teaching best practices. These pieces are, they're infinitely replicable, so you can deploy it in multiple places within a course if you want students to get repeated practice, or again do that sort of pre-assessment of their knowledge before moving into a module, and then check their understanding at the end. And again, I strongly encourage you to browse those examples on h5p.org. There's just a whole panoply of different things that you can do with this. Many of them, we ourselves haven't even officially built into a course yet. So we'd also love to hear about if you find a novel way to use, they have an advent calendar thing. If you find a good way to use that within a course, I would love to hear about that. And then we have another question from Yvonne. Can we share the templates that we made? Would love to play around with all this. It sounds fascinating. Yep. So we only have one official template at this point, which is the dialogue card template. But we encourage you to kind of riff off of that. The idea was to share that template and to build that template as an example of how we might strategically collect content from a subject matter expert or faculty member. um, yeah, and I'm right there with you, Yvonne. Go ahead and play around with these examples. Imagine how they might fit into a course. There's a lot of text-based components, image-based components. There are ways to combine these into even, what I would call a small OER, using what is it, the presentation tool,
The
right,
book
Jessica?
feature, I think it's the book feature.
There's a book feature, but then there's also, I think it's called course presentation.
Mm.
Um, Maybe I'm remembering wrong, or they renamed it. So, um, yeah. And Jessica, I don't want to talk over you if you've had any, thoughts percolate up as I've been looking at the chat. I mean, feel free to share.
No, you're doing a great job answering all the questions.
All right, thanks. Yeah, and keep them coming. If anybody has any other questions, we'd be happy to talk about this. And I'll just say, as people are thinking or percolating, our hope too is that this presentation and this information would be useful to individuals in a variety of situations, right? So Jessica and I are part of a larger ID team within a department that also has, media people, learning technology specialists, that sort of thing. But we really saw when we started working with H5P, we really thought to ourselves, this is something that, even a one person team, an individual ID working with, say, a large number of faculty could really take advantage of. It's pretty easy to stand up content quickly. It's really inspiring. I feel when faculty see it, they get pretty excited about it. So please um, don't feel like this isn't for you if you're part of a smaller team. We really see a big advantage and a big opportunity for you if that's your situation. We have another question here. Do we know much about Lumi and how it compares to H5P.com? Oh, I'm sorry, I've never heard of Lumi. Jessica, have
Mm-mm.
you heard of it?
I have not, and I actually just took a peek onto um this is really interesting. I took a peek onto the Lumi website and it actually looks like they're using H5P content. Um, so I wonder if it's just like another kind of version of it or for a different it looks like it's based out of the UK maybe.
Okay. Yeah,
Um,
I
yeah.
wouldn't be surprised. H5P is, I don't know if it's exactly open source or Creative Commons, but they make the source code available so that you can, if you have that set of skills, you
Hmm.
can develop your own bespoke content types, or, for example, have your own branding attached to those. We
Hmm.
do not possess those skills. We've been, just been using H5P pretty much straight out of the box. And again, so many options are offered, that we haven't really felt the need up to this point to do any customization. But I wouldn't be surprised if there are other organizations out there offering, their own sort of customized versions or their own unique content types. All right. And then a question: Can we talk more about hosting H5P on WordPress and how that works? We can't really give you too many other details. I will. I'm gonna bring this up here quick, and I've disconnected my keyboard. Uh, I'm gonna share a link to the H5P page talking about the WordPress plugin that we use. Um, like I said, unfortunately, I don't really live on the IT side of things. Basically, what happened was, I'll tell you a little bit of the story of how this implementation came about. Our media team, our learning technology team, they were piloting the paid h5p.com side of things. So there were about, I think there was four author profiles associated with that particular subscription. We had way more than four people interested in trying this tool out. And so, our learning technology team became kind of so fed up with swapping these profiles between people as they wanted to try this out, that they said, "We're just going to create our own integration." Again, using this WordPress plugin. I don't think it took them terribly long to stand up. If you have anybody on your team that's capable of doing any, web application development, or if you already have a website, chances are, this is something that is possible for you. Um, yeah, and it's, like I said, we really like the WordPress implementation because it's much easier for us to collaborate, to see each other's examples. We can duplicate other people's content, modify it, and everyone else on the team still has access to it. So it's really sped up our ability to develop best practices, with different H5P content types. But that's as technical as I can get about, how the implementation actually works. um, yeah, if you think an extended conversation about that implementation would be beneficial for you, we can certainly, try to set up a call. Well, I don't think Ethan is with our organization any longer, though.
Mm.
The employee that, is actually responsible for setting it up, has left just like in the past week. But we do have access to the documentation and notes, that sort of shaped how the implementation came about. So.
I would also say that one of the things that was beneficial about the switch to our own hosting was just it was difficult to just even prototype something when we
Yep.
were using the paid version because of the limited author profiles, and so then it was kind of hard to get buy-in when we were
Hmm.
working with faculty, compared to now, where all of us are authors, we all have access to it. I can spin something up before I meet with a faculty member and show it to them, and then they're like, yes, I want that. um,
Hmm.
so then it just has made it easier for us to expand how many courses we're using this with,
Hmm.
when it's easier for everybody to make content and show off content.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great point. I had already repressed how difficult it was to set up material, to get it embedded in the learning management system from the H5P interface. And we have another, chat from, Kristen, saying that you'd like to see, the documentation, for that implementation. Kristen, if you could send either of us an email, we can respond, and I can send you a cleaned up version of the implementation notes there. And you're wondering what LMS we use. We use Canvas, but I have worked in Blackboard in the past. And I don't think there would be any challenge really bringing this over into Blackboard.
It does work in Moodle as well.
Yep.
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 So Yvonne asked about Moodle. It can
Yep.
integrate in Moodle too.
Yeah, actually, I'm just gonna send another link here. If you're curious about any other integrations, here's the page that lists all of their LMS integrations. So
Kristen said, do you use an embed code to put the activities into Canvas? Yes, that's my preferred method. It just makes it easier, I think, to move it around a page. You can do a bit more dynamic resizing with it.
mhm.
Um, yeah, so that's my preferred way to put it in Canvas is via the
Yeah.
embed code.
Yeah, yeah. If you're more comfortable with HTML authoring within your learning management system, the embed code is usually the best way to go. However, again, you're not prohibited from using that LTI integration, and then that hooks up right with the rich text editor media tools. At
Mhm.
least in Canvas, that's the way it functions. So, yep, it makes it just kind of a drop down if you deploy something. Cool. And any other questions? We've got 10 minutes left. Really enjoyed your engagement
Mhm.
here. It's a
Mhm.
small yet mighty group. Yeah, a lot of thanks in the chat there too.
Mhm. Mhm.
You're very welcome, and we've been appreciative of your participation. This has been valuable for us too.
Yes.
We've spent a year working on this. It's been really great to collect our thoughts and reflect on the need that we're meeting with this. So we really appreciate the opportunity to speak to everybody.
And thanks to our presenters and our attendees.
Hmm.
This was very informative. Just need to find the time to try it all out.
Yep. Yep. Wonderful.
And so if there's no more questions, we can go ahead and give you 9 extra minutes back into your day.
Great.
Wonderful. Thank you all.
Sounds good. Yep. Thanks again.
And
Take care, everybody.
thank you so much.